Hello everybody. Welcome back. Here we are. It's as if I never left this little box here. We're back for some Light and Land live streaming, and I've got Astrid with me. Astrid, how are you doing?
Evening, everybody. Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Thank you for stepping up and being the first person into the live stream. You know, a seasoned veteran now. We're a few years in. You've had a few of these under your belt, so you should know the format. But for everybody out there watching, hopefully there is some people watching, or there are some people watching. We're very happy to be back here live streaming, and as usual, we'll be in Facebook or on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you miss this, or if you have to dash off halfway through because the kitchen's on fire, don't worry. You can come back and you can see it on YouTube, or you can see it on Facebook. And we're streaming in full 1080 HD over on YouTube. So if you want the best quality viewing, I advise you to watch it on YouTube if at all possible. You don't need an account. You can just jump on and watch. And as ever, if you are watching live, we would encourage you to ask questions, fire us any thoughts about the images, ask what Astrid's favorite dinner is. No, sensible questions about photography are always welcome, and or the locations as well. So all you need to do is just pop those in the comments box and I will pick those up. And if you are out there watching, which I can see a good number of you are with us, do say hello in the comments box, because I know many of you have watched us before, and I'm sure many of those people will be back watching us again, and we really do appreciate you giving up your Monday evenings now. It's not Tuesday, is it? I have to remember that, otherwise there's going to be an awful error one week. That we do appreciate you joining us on your Monday evenings. So just as a little bit of a preamble before we dive into Transylvania, I should have got some spooky graphics or something, but we're going to dispel that myth momentarily. I did want to say we are doing a series of these live streams. Charlie's with us as well. Hello, Charlie. Welcome back from India, Charlie. You've been out there light and landing, so I hope you had a fantastic time. I'm only totally jealous. What was I saying? I was saying that we're going to do a series of these live streams. We've got a number of the leaders lined up to come and talk about locations, and hello to everyone, by the way, that's saying hello. We are going to do some specials as well. We've got an autumn special. We're going to have a winter special, and we're going to have, brace yourselves, a super geeky gear special, which I am super looking forward to, where we're going to park the whole "it's what you do with it that counts," and we're just going to geek out about cameras and gear and everything else. And it's going to be a safe space. But thank you to everyone saying hello. Some very familiar names, of which we're always very appreciative. Mike joining us as ever, and Jane saying hello, Charlie. Oh, hello, Jane. I'll pass that back from him. But the format of the evenings, for those who maybe haven't seen one of these before, if there are any of you out there and this is your first time, I talk to one of the Light and Land leaders about a location, commonly one or sometimes two, and it's a location that they have specialist knowledge about, and they will be leading a tour to, and or have in the past, and or will again. And I asked them to walk me through some of the images, and we'll talk about some of the things to do with the locations, and we'll talk about some of the things to do with the actual picture and the image making processes, and of course the aesthetics all around photography and everything photography related. So as mentioned earlier, if you have any questions at all about either the locations and or the images, do please let us know in the comments, and I will pick those up. And Ken, excellent, correspondent on the Isle of Sheppey, I'm glad to see you back with us as well. Right, I've done an awful lot of talking, but I did want to just reintroduce the live streams. And as I say, we'll be with you all the way up until Christmas, every other week, pretty much. Just keep your eye out for, yeah, pretty much, he says, because I've got a little
coming, isn't there?
I've got a little gap in between because I'm going away. Anyway, we won't go there. Right. Oh no, I've shown you something I'm not allowed to show you. Sneaky. I will come back to that later. Astrid, just before I get us into the actual images,
Yep.
Can you just cover one little bit of technical? Because I believe on the back of the exhibition that was in London at the beginning of September, there are a handful of Mile Gallery's exhibition books, essentially. Catalogues, yes, available. So these are just £5 in the UK. I'm correct in saying that, and we can ship them to the rest of the world. So could you just 20 seconds on what's inside those, Astrid, for anyone who may not know?
There's a few catalogs left which detail all the exhibitors with all their images and all their contact details and information, thumbnails of each image, and we have a few left, so we're happy to ship them out. We have shipped a few already, but postage UK £5. If you're hailing from further afield, just give us a buzz and we'll figure out the postage to get it to you.
Yeah. Fab. So that is, if you didn't get there, it might be nice to see the vast array of images. Very successful exhibition, lots of buzz around it, lots of visitors, some sales as well, which is always nice for everyone. And I've seen loads of great feedback about people who were involved. And if you were there and you want to grab an extra copy or two of that, it might be neat to share with your friends and family just to show what you've been up to, as it were. So there you go. That is the that's the, what should we call it, the housekeeping, I suppose, taken care of. I'm getting back into the swing of things, everyone. Don't worry, I've had a few months off, that's why. But let us now talk about Transylvania, Astrid, because even the very mention of the word is so evocative. It immediately will paint lots of pictures in people's minds, and we may touch on why some people think certain things, and we may touch on some of the locations that people may refer to. But you have traveled a little bit in this area, haven't you? So just before we even get to the very first image, what was it maybe that first led you to explore that area and want to do a tour there for Light and Land?
That's a good question, actually.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, no, it's I've been to most of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe, but I hadn't been to Romania, and I've seen fantastic images, and I just wanted to see it for myself. And we have run tours there before in years gone by, and I just thought this is really interesting. And also, it's always good to get to a place and see what it's really like, a place of maybe about which you have lots of ideas and preconceptions, and a lot of these are often proven wrong. So I thought Romania was a good place to go. Transylvania in particular, one of the areas. It's got sort of 3-4 distinct areas, and Transylvania's sort of one of the very central ones in the mountains. And you know, I am German by birth, and Transylvania has had a lot of Germans. There's a lot of German influence there, and so maybe that played a little role as well in seeing what it's like.
Nice. Well, sometimes on these chats we go through in a sort of chronological thing about what the tour would be. Sometimes we pick out themes, and tonight we're sort of going to pick on 3 or 4 themes and types of imagery that you might experience if you were to come on a trip to Transylvania with Astrid, and generally to know about the place and obviously the landscapes, the people, some of the culturally diverse elements that you would experience there, and some of its history, which Astrid has sort of just briefly touched on there as well. And just as I just sort of dive into the images, just to very briefly say, primarily we're talking about this is actually a trip that is happening in May of 2025, 3rd to the 11th of May. There is only one space actually available on that tour, so that's pretty much already sold, but there is one space should you be interested, and you may like to make up that so it's complete, as it were. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But if you did want to jump on at any point after this to look about the tour and all the bits and bobs that's involved, lightandland.co.uk, you can find that. And as we say, that's going to be in May 2025, last place. But Astrid, let's just get into some of the landscapes, because you've mentioned there is a mountainous element to this area. And so if you can maybe talk us through a little bit about some of the differences, we will see those, and then maybe let's talk a little bit about this image as well.
Yes, well, the biggest mountain range that goes all the way geographically through Romania is the Carpathian Mountains. quite tall mountains, and there's a lot of areas that are sort of sub mountains, sort of Apuseni mountains and so forth. So there are areas in the north of the country that are more flat or fertile lands, and then you have this sort of Carpathian mountains swirl all around through the central areas and down south when it meets on the towards Bulgaria as well. But Transylvania is pretty much central, and it's got some flat bits, but it's fairly mountainous. And we will be crossing those mountains once or twice and driving along those areas. So you'll see, pretty amazing landscapes that you might not expect. You might not know about the beautiful landscapes of Romania, because it's probably not talked about as much as, I don't know, the Alps or the Dolomites or the Pyrenees or whatever, or American mountain ranges. It's not talked about much, but it's very, very beautiful, and it's got anything that more well-known mountain ranges can have. Anything, the rocks, the paths, the misty morning sunrises, valleys, beautiful streams, everything.
But less people, probably.
A lot fewer people. Yes, it's pretty much empty. You hardly ever see a tourist.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen a tourist there. I mean, very few.
Yeah,
very few. So it's really beautiful, and you have the time and the space to explore it all, and hopefully be impressed.
I think what's really interesting about that is that it's a chance to also come back with some fairly unique images, not necessarily images of places and things which we've all seen lots of times before. And so, if you're adding to a portfolio, or if you're developing your landscape work generally, it's quite a neat way to, fill up some more images that aren't necessarily so well known. That can actually be challenging in different ways, because you don't go with a preconceived idea of what you're going there to shoot. But just briefly on this particular one then, before we move on through a couple more. Black and white, Astrid, in the landscape. I've seen plenty of black and white work from you before, but not necessarily so much landscape. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, feel free to correct me. But you couldn't help yourself here.
I couldn't help myself. And actually, this is a mobile phone shot. And it was made with an app that I've discovered more recently. And most of the time it's quite useless, actually. It's supposed to mimic well-known photographers' black and white styles.
Okay.
And this is the Ansel Adams.
I was going to say, it's got to be Ansel, hasn't it? Yeah.
And quite, I mean, there's Henri Cartier-Bresson style and God knows what. And I haven't really found it terribly well. Often it looks completely sort of over processed or overcooked. Yeah, but we were driving along, and I don't think I had sort of much time in setting up a camera and all that. So, but I felt that the graphics were just so strong in this one with this road. Obviously, you can see just a tiny little car there. And I thought that might work really well in black and white, the contrast. And so I used the phone with that app, and I think it came out okay. Obviously, it was quite annoying that one little bend of the road is hidden, but I would have fallen over the cliff if I tried to. There was no way of getting it in, the bottom right. But it was just the view was just amazing, and it just lent itself. Really, dark blue sky, white clouds, and this sort of wiggly road.
Lovely hairpin bends, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
And you can see the scale from the car that's sort of visible there in the middle. That it's huge. It really is, and So I loved it. I thought it worked really well in black and white.
Well, there you go, Astrid, Ansel, you've done a good job there. We have obviously pointed out the fact that this particular trip is in May, which actually is a really interesting time to go to any mountainous region, in my opinion. Because you do still get a nice mix of weather, and you can see here there's still plenty of snow up on the tops, but you do get lovely spring greens as well, which is always nice to play with. Alison says she's very much looking forward to joining you.
Yeah.
It looks fabulous. Alison, you're one of the lucky few seemingly already there, so that's good. So yeah, that time of year, Astrid, again, was that just for a real nice mix of conditions, a nice mix of those colours? And
yes, I think, well, I've done now trips in spring and in autumn, and they're both fabulous times to go. This is in early May. We've done this before. It's wonderful. It's got the greenery, obviously. It's got flowering stuff everywhere. Still got snow in the mountains, obviously. We get hopefully we get some misty mornings in the mountains, which we sort of specifically go for. And it's just a wonderful time of year to go. You get later on we'll talk about some wilder life we might encounter. But as much as autumn is wonderful, spring is really, really beautiful, and I'm looking forward to it. I couldn't really decide which one was my favorite time to go. So, but those two times.
Do one of each. It's fine. So weather-wise, is it a little bit of a mix of cooler at night, warm if it's a sunny day? Is that low 20s?
Yeah, it's absolutely pleasant. I mean, we're not as high. We may be a little bit higher near the end, where in the morning you get out for sunrise, or just after. You'll obviously have to have some fleece on and stuff because temperatures will drop. But generally, it's. I remember it being very pleasant.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So these are the Carpathian Mountains, is it, that we're looking at here?
I can't actually remember.
Just say yes. It's fine. No one will know.
Yes, absolutely.
That's right. Don't worry, we're not live. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Okay. So I mean,
those. I think it's all part of the Carpathian Mountains.
Yeah.
Or some of them, I mean, yeah, some of them, different sort of types of mountains, but I think it's all part of that big range, really. Yeah.
But you can see there's a tiny little, looks like some housing down there in the left, a dwelling, but I mean, really, there's a lot of big open space there as well. Is that fair to say that there are fairly nice open spaces?
I put this in just because of the contrast of the, there's these sort of sweeping meadows, and we're going down into the valley, and then we're going along the mountainside, and then these really high mountains in the background. And I love the green and the blue sort of warmish and coldish sort of colors, but and the big herds of sheep there with shepherds and stuff that you see in the foreground. But so this is obviously a big area at the foot of these hills which we cross.
Always nice to be at the foot. On the edge of mountains is actually a great place to be normally. Lots of good light, and you get the edge of the weather normally as well, which is always good.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I really, 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 really love this when I saw the images coming through and we were getting them up in order and stuff. And again, you talked just on that previous image about the cool tones and the warmer tones, and obviously we've got kind of that quite dramatically here as well. So just fairly long. I know I'm getting a little bit technical about the images, but we're here to do that as well as talk about the places. Are we a fairly long focal length here?
I don't think so, actually. I think
50.
All the places we went to in the sort of natural surroundings, there's a lot of birches, and oh, Catherine, great. Well, there's a lot of birches, and this is an autumn picture, obviously, so most of the leaves are gone, but we see them in spring as well with the fresh greenish leaves, which looks absolutely fabulous as well. But this was just, I think it was not far from the roadside, so just pointing a camera, and obviously I loved the tops being lit, and the back of which was a hill on part of the mountains being in shadow, and then you've got all these lines sort of almost sideways from the branches, the twigs, and the trunks upright, obviously behind. So yeah, I've got probably about 3 or 4 shots of these trees in different varieties with triangles of lit bits and then darkness behind, and so this was just brilliant. So but there's a lot of these around, a lot of birches, and both in spring and in autumn they make fantastic subjects.
So let's just I mean, because you're a bit being a tiny bit naughty, Astrid, because you're just saying, oh, you know, just popped off the side, just pointed the camera at it, and it just kind of worked, you know. But then you went on to detail a few things which are obviously happening in your mind in the background. So you mentioned you made a few different compositions there, and obviously that's what happens, isn't it? Sometimes we sort of work a scene as we try to see what stage it best fits upon in terms of how we compose it. So what was it about this particular version that you felt was the most compelling of maybe 3 or 4 different variants that you took?
The reason why I haven't put the other, I know there's another 2 pictures in, is that we don't have enough time to look at in detail at all of them, but I love them equally well. I mean, the triangular one, now I regret not having sent it to you, but there we go. But in all of them, it was I have the difference between the warm and sunlit trees with the sort of leaves on the top and the dark unlit and cool background. They're all like that, and I just have various compositions. I mean, I could have, in this one, I could have cut off the tree on the right, or I could have got in some more trunks, and I think the other direction was a bit of a sort of a lit field which formed that triangle in the background. But they were all lit treetops, as it were, and dark backgrounds with just trunks visible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is about as much about the difference, or the combination of warm and cold colors, as it is about the graphic shape of the strong sort of trunks in the background, and the twigs of the trees in the foreground, which are sort of sideways, almost, not quite, maybe, I don't know, 45, 60 degrees to the sort of going sideways, which I just love the different lines in the picture. It creates some tension, but at the same time, I find it very, the little leaves, I find them very sort of pleasing.
Yeah,
very sort of,
little stars,
I can imagine standing there and looking at the trees and the sort of last remaining leaves. You can philosophize about those, you know, the autumn, obviously, when everything comes off and dies off, and
yes, the cold veil spectre behind. But I think, again, you're being slightly modest, because you've been very neat about your composition and just leaving a bit of space on the right and left. It's very important to just check those edges, that nothing, maybe for that sense of calm, that nothing's just catching anywhere, which would trip our minds in the subconscious. I think always what's difficult, and then we'll just move on this sec, but sometimes when you've got, you know, woodland and trees, and it's always just knowing how far you want your frame to come down below, because there's always bits jutting up and left and right, and that's obviously one of the things that if you are out on a tour with one of the light and land leaders, you know, we will spend lots of time with you talking about that compositions and looking at it on your camera, and we'll help you make a few variations. And often, sometimes, if there are times in the evening, or if it's particularly inclement weather, you know, we can go through some images sometimes and talk about that as a group, and that can be a really interesting thing to learn from if and when the time allows it. And talking of time allowing, I must remember to keep us rolling along, otherwise we'll just sit here yakking all evening. And actually, Jez, sorry to be late. That is not good enough. You must never be late again. It's great to have you back, Jez. Please try and be on time next time. We are in a more rustic, potentially, or an even more rustic location here. Astrid, am I correct in saying?
Yeah, it's kind of up in the hills as well. And this is, again, it's an autumn picture. But in this one, as well as in the previous one, there was a lot of sort of thirds, if you're looking at composition and all that. And in this one, again, you see where the barns are positioned, or whatever's left of them, as it were.
Yeah.
And then obviously this menacing cloud that's sort of almost pointing its finger, you know, in the background there. But it's the same thing. I just loved the different colors. So the warm colors with sunlit, and the cold colors in the background. And it just I don't know what it is about them, but it's just so pleasing to look at, I find. And I mean, this was sort of sunrise time, so we were right up at the top, and the sun hits those little huts, as it were, these little sort of barns. Trees are bare, but all sort of autumnal colors in that one.
But there's something about being, up fairly or halfway up a mountain first thing in the morning. It's a life affirming way to start a day. Generally, I find to be, seeing the sun come out, seeing the day start, as it were. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit more about the people that you would experience if you're on the trip, because there are a lot of interesting cultures and a lot of interesting history, as Astrid's already touched on. This area of Europe in particular has been it's been Roman, it's been Gaul, it's been German, it's been all sorts. It's been Hungarian in the last 150 years as well. So it's been all kinds of things. But so you do generally get a really nice melting pot there. But I believe agriculture, even small scale agriculture, is quite prevalent still in the areas you're going to be visiting. Yeah. And let's just sort of change tack a little bit then before we just get onto the people, because obviously when a lot of people talk about Romania, one thing that might leap to mind are bears, and obviously this is what we're seeing here. So maybe just touch a little bit about why you wanted to put this element into the trip.
Yeah, Romania has, I think, apart from Russia, the largest bear population in Europe, brown bears, and you can easily encounter them. I mean, when we go for little walks in spring, we might have some bear spray with us just in case. And so I haven't seen one in the wild yet, but I've seen footprints, so they've been about. But anyway, a lot of bears were kept captive in Romania over many decades and centuries probably. But since the country joined the EU a number of years ago, various legislation obviously has been implemented, and one of it is sort of not having bears hanging around in your back garden and dancing for you and all sorts of things. So a lot of them are in shelters and sanctuaries, and we have visited sort of one of these sanctuaries, and of course for safety reasons they have to be behind bars. They're well looked after, have places where they can obviously hide, where you don't actually see them. But I did want to keep, well, there was no other option really, but I wanted to keep the fence in. And when this bear sort of looked at me, I managed to sort of grab a shot, and it sort of conveys perhaps a little bit the life all of these bears in that sanctuary had to lead at some point. They're now obviously all been freed. They can't be released into the wild because of behavior issues and all that. They wouldn't be able to look after themselves. But so they are in this sanctuary, and yeah, somehow I thought it'd be nice to capture this place, to capture the spirit of the place. And I know the bear looks sad because he or she had a very sad life. Now, obviously, it's much happier there where they are and looked after and all that. But hopefully, with keeping the fence in the foreground, as it were, and including it in the picture, that sort of comes across their fate, as it were. And we will be visiting another place next time, so it's not going to be a sanctuary, but it will be watching bears in the wild, actually, near a sort of in a little lookout station. So hopefully we'll be able to see some bears without fences. Yeah. Maybe through glass, but
yeah, something for everybody's safety is good. Yeah,
but it is a big part of, and it used to be a big part of life in Romania, and there are lots about, and there are lots in the wild as well, and there are quite strict instructions as well what to do if you encounter one, and what not to do in particular.
Yeah, and it's a difficult subject because it was a difficult situation for a good number of years, and it's obviously that they're moving forward on that, but it would be remiss just to ignore the whole thing, as it were. But I know we wanted to add this one in because it's just a different kind of twist on being in that environment, obviously with this background, with our background bear, as it were.
Yeah, that is a bear, in case you can recognize it. But I did want to keep it out of focus and just photograph the leaf in the foreground to have it give it more of a suggestive sort of feel. And and it's sort of lit as it's sort of walking away from the fence. Well, there you go.
Yeah, lovely light, lovely light. And the other thing we wanted to spend a good amount of time though on was about talking about some of the people that you're going to meet. So there is a local guide who helps connect and who's very experienced, and we've had experience with as well, and Astrid has also. And so that's really important, I think, Astrid, isn't it? Because whenever you have interactions with local residents, local population, it can be so easy for things to, and there's lots of reasons for this, which isn't what we're here to talk about tonight, but it can be so easy for things to just turn into sort of a slight tourist attraction, and then the people you're going to see just kind of know that's why you're coming, and it becomes a little bit transactional. Even if no money's changing hands, it can become a transactional thing, and everybody then starts to go through the kind of routine of it, both shooters and the sitters, as it were. But I know you've worked hard with Daniel, I believe, isn't it, to really actually meet some people genuinely and have forge those connections. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that whole sort of ethos for this tour, and obviously about this chap who we've got in front of us.
Yeah, well, generally, obviously our guy Daniel has the experience, he's got the connections, and he speaks the language. Not many of the local people speak English, so we rely on translation. Some do speak English, and obviously very few of us speak Romanian. I think a couple of years ago we had an Italian lady. She could actually converse with them because Romanian is kind of it's quite close to sort of the old Latin and Italian as well. So that was quite an interesting experience. But generally, we need the translation to interact with all these people. We have over the years met very different people. So it's not always the same people that you say, okay, well, here we're coming here, I'm bringing another group to photograph you. So that may apply to some, but other than that, we obviously go with the flow. Sorry, that's a clock in the background. We go with the flow of fitting into their lives, as it were. So when we go and meet some shepherds or go travel to find them up the hills, it depends on where they are, whether they're about, and there may be the ones we met last time were not the ones we met the year before. So it depends on who's around, who's working where, who's got time, and I think that's the nice thing. We don't these are not sort of set up photo shoots as such. So we meet real people who are going about their lives. I mean, this bloke, his name is Istvan actually, and he had his big fire behind him, and we watched him doing his the horseshoes and the various things, a blacksmith, while he worked. And kindly he looked to us and talked to us, and allowed us to photograph him. But generally, we have to fit in with the people and their lives. So we're not just turning up and everybody's lining up to be photographed. So that's not the case. Yeah. So this is in one of the villages. This is the blacksmith, the local blacksmith, and we learn an awful lot about their lives, what they do, what they look after, what work they do, how they sort of basically earn their living, and that's really that's a really great experience. And then of course, if you learn about them and you learn about their ways of life, their way of thinking, it makes for more interesting photographs as well, because they might open up to you, they might share stuff with you, or they might see that you're actually interested in how they live, which is one of the wonderful things that you have on a trip like that. You actually learn about these people about whom we know nothing. All we hear about Romania, I mean, that may be an exaggeration, but think back the last 10 times you heard something in the news about Romania or Romanians, and I bet it will have been quite negative. And And so we perhaps only hear fairly one-sided stories, and it's wonderful to actually see it for yourself and learn about these people.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think I'm going to ask you a little bit more about shooting in these environments as we go through a couple of these images, but this chap's mustache, I'm sorry. I mean, you've just said something very serious and sensible there, and I've just gone to the mustache. But I mean, if you're going to have one, you got to have one, right? And if you've got the hat as well, he just looks like he knows what he's doing. And I mean, we will talk. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, to make light of things.
Got the horseshoe right here, actually. The big
oh,
horseshoe.
Really? Oh, yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, he made some for us, little ones and big ones. And
many horses at home, or no?
No, I actually, in fact, I bought the horseshoe because I wanted to
support. Yes.
I wanted to support, and I also wanted to have one.
Yeah. Okay.
A real one, as it were.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Great image, and he you can tell when someone's happy being shot, and that's really nicely come across. This gentleman is one of the shepherds, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, that's one of the shepherds we met at some point. His name is George, and or Georg, in the Romanian version of it. And he was up at the mountain with his colleague, as it were. There were two, and they were looking after, I think it was about 4,000 sheep, basically after all the sheep from all the villagers, as it were. And they live up in the mountains for like 6 or 7 months a year, between sort of March and October. And they're just up there with their sheep. They have these two little shacks in which they sleep. Well, they're not long enough to actually stretch out. The man is not, so they have to. They can't sit in it. And they have this little sort of shack where they make cheese, both to eat themselves and then any leftovers are kind of brought back down to sell. And it was just most interesting thing to see how they live up there in the mountains with absolutely nothing. I mean, all they had was these little sort of bedsteads, which are right by the herd, because there are bears, there are wolves. So they've got shepherd dogs, and then they've got real big guard dogs. They're these absolutely massive dogs that are 3 times as long as sort of dogs, basically, that would take it up with wolves and bears. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And it was just fascinating learning about how they live their lives. I mean, it would be a bit unfair, but I remember that the guide asked me how old I think this gentleman was, and I overestimated it by 30 years. But so obviously that's a hard life, and I think it shows in his face. And I'm sort of glad. I mean, this was, you mentioned earlier, to talk about how you shoot in these environments. It was dark. It was within this little sort of shack they had up there. There's nothing for it but cranking up your ISO. You don't have flash and stuff like that with you, obviously. So you just try and make the best of the opportunity that presents itself. And and I think that worked quite well with George. Caught him there in a sort of a thoughtful moment, and who knows what he was thinking about.
Yeah, no, lovely light and lovely capture of his expression, like you say. And I mean, I think you mentioned the cheese, so we should show the cheese. But I think you mentioned,
actually delicious. We were given some to try.
Oh, you got some as
that
well.
Was really young cheese. That was about 3 weeks old or something, and then the strong one that was already like ripening, sort of for 4 months or something. So that was, I think these are the two types we tried, and with that, of course, a real strong, some sort of brandy or something to wash it down.
A little bit of Romanian moonshine.
Of course, homemade, lovely stuff.
I mean, I think you like we've said a couple of times, but when you go on these trips, be it this to Romania or some, plenty of other trips that we do, and others, you may have been on yourself if you've been traveling. The photography is obviously a big part of it, the clues in the title, but photography is not separated from the life experience and the learning and discovering cultures, and that should inform and support and lift up the photography, you know. And I think that's a really important thing sometimes, is actually to just even not have the camera up to your eye, but just to engage, to listen, to learn, isn't it? And to, you know, that can then inform how you best, you know, capture that sense of that place or of that person. You know,
Yeah,
I'm sure you would agree with that. Talking of which, it's fantastic couple of images coming up, and I want you to just explain a little bit more about what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so we're visiting a Romani village and meet people there. And this lady is, well, there's about, I don't know, 5 or 6 generations in the house. You must imagine the houses are, they're all a little bit like a little Taj Mahal. This is sort of the tradition. Obviously, all the people came from, you know, the Indian sort of subcontinent, and the houses seem to be built just to sort of reflect that. And there's any number of rooms in there, I don't know how many, but most of them are quite sort of bare. But this is a family, and there was the grandfather and the great grandfather, the grandfather, the father, the son, the grandson, so about 5 generations. And anyway, this is the mother whose daughters had just grown up, basically. So she was sort of in the middle. Can't tell you which generation it was. Anyway, and we were in this room, and there were 3 piles just like the one you see there. And she suddenly sort of started to have her own thoughts, you know, follow her own thoughts, standing there. And what we learned was that this pile you see there is the dowry for one of her daughters. And this room, which was it was all neat, but it wasn't decorated in any way. So all that you see, the walls are as they are. It had on 3 walls a pile each, because they had 3 daughters. And as is part of their culture, obviously the daughters get married off, and then the dowry follows at some point later when the marriage is consummated, as it were, and the child is produced. But we talked a lot, and our guide kindly sort of translated, and we asked a lot of questions. And I found it fascinating to learn about their lives and their traditions, and just the way they live there. It was lovely people, and yeah. And when I caught her in that moment, I thought it was quite moving in a way. It created a sort of I call them sort of open-ended images, where you can sort of put your own thoughts into it, or your own story into it. So you don't actually see the answers of the story, as it were.
Yeah.
And then the next minute or so later, she sort of looked at me, and I felt invited to make that photograph, as it were. And it's not a happy or a funny photograph. It's just basically, I don't know, she kind of let me into her life in that 1 second, as it were, or split second of making the image. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Photographically, obviously, a window on one side, so very bright on one side, dark on the other. But it doesn't matter. I don't think you need to see the sort of other half of the face. I thought it was just a beautiful moment, really.
No, it's perfect. It's
often
perfect.
ask myself, you know, what's going on in her mind in that moment.
Yeah.
The things that we know so little about their lives.
And I think the 2 images together, and obviously knowing the backstory and hearing about that, and that is an example of, this isn't obviously what we're talking about right now, but why sometimes words are important to follow along with photography or imagery, because the 2 can help enlighten each other. And I think having the 2 images with a little bit of the context here, and the more, you know, of an environmental portrait, as it were, than as well as the portrait that comes along with it, I think is a really, really nice pair of images that tell much more than just you know, the classic portrait, as it were, which often we might find ourselves sort of lulled into, but often the story is also a bit wider and a bit more about what you're seeing in the rest of the environment. So but and the headscarf and the red and the light, I love it. I absolutely love it, and that's why I picked it for the cover and put it in there. So no, that's really, really nice. Now I'm going to keep us gently rolling along. We're chugging along nicely for time. We normally do around 50-55 up to an hour on these sessions. So thank you so much, everyone, for following along with us as you have been doing. Just a very quick reminder about two things. We're talking about Transylvania and our Transylvania tour, and this particular trip is happening in May of 2025. There is only one place actually available, but we wanted to talk about it to share it with you because if you wanted to come in May, you'd be very much welcome. There is that one space available, 3rd to the 11th of May. And can I let a little secret out, Astrid, or do you not want me to do that? Yeah, okay, I will do then. So Astrid will be going back there as well in autumn 26. That's correct, isn't it, Astrid?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so no, that's not up yet, and it won't be up quite yet, but if you can't make the May trip and you did fancy it, and maybe you fancied an autumn one, there may well be the opportunity for that, or there will be coming up very soon. And just before, as again, we get going into the final selection of 3 or 4 images, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. Again, if you do have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anything you want to share with us, just pop them in the comments box, and I'll be happy to ask Astrid. And obviously, we'll share our answers on that. So let's just get into these last couple of images, Astrid, because this might works absolutely as a very graphical image, and this was another one that caught my eye when we were looking through them. But again, this might benefit even further from a little bit of a background explanation. So maybe you could fill us in on this and the location.
Yeah, well, on one hand, we have the beautiful nature and the beautiful landscapes that we'll look at. On the other hand, there are challenges, let's put it like that, from an environmental point of view, that are caused by industrial works and so forth. And this is actually it's the edge of a lake, and it is a lake that is growing because it is fed by the water that comes out of a mine, a copper mine. And the water that goes through there, it's full of remnants of the stuff that's in the mine. And so the actual water has got very funny colors, but on the edge of the lake, it sort of cakes into this sort of nondescript substance. I don't know, we never stepped on it, so I don't know if you can actually walk on it or whether you'd be sinking into some sort of a 3 feet deep sort of mud. But I thought obviously that it's the reason why I photographed it is that it's part of the whole picture of the area, of the history, of the current life, and so I thought it's worth documenting. But from a photographic point of view, I loved obviously the shapes of the sort of cracked mud, and this almost sort of it's more as duotone, as it were. It's the grey, and then just the little sort of green bits that are sort of growing out of this sort of mud, and I thought it's if I were to make a book about this area, it'd have to be part of it, because it's kind of part of what the people there have to deal with. And along that lake, there is a village that's sort of sinking into the water. Well, most of it has sunk into the water and is uninhabitable, because simply the water rises, and eventually it will swallow up all the houses. We did actually meet on one of the trips an elderly lady. Initially, we saw some cows, and then she appeared, and through our guide, who obviously could speak the Romanian, we kind of made friends with her, and we talked about this. And she still lived in one of those last houses near that lake, and she had about 6 or 7 cows. Talk about small scale farming. And yeah, we had a little talk, and she said basically she's completely abandoned. There's no shops or anything. I don't know how she actually lives there. She showed us where her husband was buried, and she said maybe in 2-3 years' time the water will be up to where I live, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing then. So who knows when we go back next what we will find. I don't know. But it's that's kind of a bit of a sad. It's an excursion where you see something that's probably not on the happy side.
No, but reality is the key in all of these things, isn't it?
That it is most likely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a really nice element of this whole tour. It isn't just we're going to take you to a beautiful place and you'll see these beautiful things, and there is plenty of that, don't get me wrong, but you're just realistically going to a very interesting region, both geographically, in the landscape and culturally, and that will always mean ups and downs, and we're going to show you through having Daniel there, the local guide, as well as obviously Astrid photographically. That's a really nice combination of finding out more about the reality of being somewhere, and I think lots of people would really appreciate that. Talking of which, that lake and the colors within that lake are, as you said, affected maybe by the contaminants. Might be a slightly, well, I don't know, maybe it isn't a strong word, but the elements, should we say, within the water, so it gives this particular hue or this particular color, right?
Yes, yeah. It's as I understand it, is this some sort of chemicals, and that's why it's this quite unnatural color. So it's not like a Caribbean style turquoise blue. It's just not, and I don't think you could sort of go in there and swim. You see a lot of dead trees in it and tree trunks, which kind of shows that it is deadly. But this was obviously on our autumn trip, and the colors of the trees were wonderful, and it gave the contrast again, the cold colors and the warm colors. I thought it worked really. Yeah, it worked for me. It worked.
And actually, just mentioning autumn there, Astrid, I'm going to take a slight tangential detour, because just if you are watching on, just stick with me till the end, because not only am I going to tell you what's coming next, but I'm going to tell you how you, even you, Jez, even though you're late, know how you can potentially be involved in our next up and coming live stream, and it will be autumn themed, and I'll come back to that momentarily. Catherine, minerals, yes, possibly, probably, don't know, potentially, and or contaminants. But yeah, Astrid hasn't suddenly lost her control and dialed her saturation levels up to 49. Don't worry, everybody. But you were mentioning there about this. This is a little glimpse in the top left of some of this, and the bottom left, I suppose, of this village, which has been sort of consumed, as it were, by
that's the roof of one. So you can see that it goes right down to the water. So the rest of it's been swallowed up already. And you see the dead trees on the right, middle right, sticking out of the water, which probably at some point were the edge of the water. Obviously, it would have been, because the house wouldn't have been standing in the water. And it just keeps rising until probably it's swallowed everything up.
Yeah. And I think that general area is quite rich in natural wealth, mineral wealth, whatever you want to call it, gold, copper, all sorts of stuff. So, and with that commonly, or can come, should we say, misuse of those natural materials in all manner of ways. And obviously this is what Astrid's showing here, and the story there about that lady that still remains. There's always usually one, isn't there, that doesn't want to go, and this can be such a wrench for people, emotionally as much as it is physically. So just as we get to and James saying typical color of copper potentially within the water, James, I'm gonna obviously not copper, I'm gonna bow to your knowledge on that. Let's just get to the last couple of images because you mentioned the German influence, Astrid, and that's not just your time there. That we can see some text up here. Are we in a sort of village locations again here?
Yeah, that's one of the villages, and we'll stay there a couple of nights as well and watch sort of the cows being herded to pasture and being greeted again in the evening, and it's lovely. And some of it is kind of dilapidated, but a lot of the houses, or at least the fronts of the houses, have been restored. I think King Charles had some interest in that as well and had been supportive in raising funds and stuff. But it's a wonderful area in that, as I understand it, there used to be a lot of Germans in the area. Initially, there were Hungarians who were sort of the warriors and sort of conquered everything. And they couldn't quite figure out how to build solid stuff, so they invited some Germans over who then built castles and sort of settlements, as it were. And initially it was 7, because in German it's called Siebenbürgen, meaning 7 castles. And when you get to these villages, they all have 3 names in 3 languages. So you have the German name, you have the Romanian name, and you have the Hungarian name. So all of these villages, you have these 3 different names. I mean, even the places we stay in, and where the airports are, for example, the places we fly in and fly away from, I know some of the German names of those places. So there's the heritage that's there, and this text obviously is above the above one of the houses, the entry gates, and it's German, and it's quite interesting to see and to read it. And
we've got a perfect guide for a bit of, if you run into a bit of German, everyone, Astrid, you know, you can probably fumble your way through.
We can help with that. Absolutely.
And I just want to bring us to a close, and then, like I say, there's a little treat for the end now. I'm just going to tell you about what's coming up next, but storks.
Yes, well, we're going in May, and in May that you will see a lot of storks, white storks. We did see them last time. They're obviously wintering in Africa, and then they come in spring into Europe. I know there's a lot of storks in Germany, East Germany in particular, and in Romania we found a lot of storks. So there's all these big storks nests everywhere, and this is in that same village. And I remember having watched them for a little while and figured out when it's going to take off from the nest for the first time in the morning. And on the second morning, I awaited my chance and tried to capture the stork when it was just leaving its nest. The amusing bit was that this was the chimney of the school, and they fired up their fire to heat up a little bit, and it was all smoking underneath the nest coming out of the chimney. But obviously, that must have happened every year. That must happen every year, because storks they come back every year and come to the same nest and have the same partner and all that, and so they obviously know what's happening. So that was quite interesting. But I do love storks. They're fun to watch.
Nice bit of light there as well.
Yeah.
So, well, firstly, thank you very much, Astrid, for that trip around Transylvania and beyond. And the land beyond the forest, I think, is from the original.
No, yeah, I mean, Transylvania. So trans is beyond. If you and in the forest, so it's a translation of its name, as it were. Yep. Transylvania is beyond the land, beyond the forest.
There you go, everyone. Language, linguistics, we're here for everything for you. So a quick reminder, 3rd to the 11th of May 2025, one place remaining, unless of course some eager beaver has got on there and booked whilst we've been talking to you about it. You never know, but do check out more on the website lightenland.co.uk to find out more about that. I'm going to pick up on one question just before we get to the next. Just literally give me 1 minute, everybody. There's a question which I know the answer to, but I'm going to put it to you. Teddy asks, do you travel to Dracula's castle, as it's been known?
We do travel to the castle, but I wouldn't call it Dracula's castle. So the myths will be dispelled when you get there. But yes, we do.
Yes, Bran
Castle, yeah.
Bran Castle. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so yes, that is true. And James, yes, even chemistry we're doing tonight as well. Thank you, everyone. The hive mind. We appreciate that, James. Jane, I'm going to pick you up your thanks in just a second, because I promised to everyone that I was going to tell you what's coming next, and I'm running over. Terrible first day back, and I'm already hitting or missed the time. So what we've got next, though, is a little autumn image special, and it's a multi Light and Land Leader special, and it's on Monday the 14th of October. So Monday 14th of October, 8 p.m, usual places. It's going to be myself, it's going to be Verity Milligan, and it's going to be Ed Rumble. And we're going to be talking about all things autumn. And it won't just be misty trees and colour. We're going to mix it up a little bit for you. But obviously, that is a very beautiful time of year. And we'll talk a little bit about gear, a little bit about conditions, a little bit about, locations, a little bit about composition, a little bit about processing, a little bit about everything. And I'll hive the minds and I'll dig into the thoughts of Ed and Verity. And we may have a special guest, and that special guest might be you. Where's my cameras? There. Because we're inviting you to play a little part in this next live stream. And what we're asking you to do, you might have seen it if you're on the Light and Land newsletter last week. You can submit a maximum of 2 images, autumn-based images. Obviously, come on, everybody. Autumn-based images. And we are going to pick out one person who we're going to ask to come onto the live stream, just for 10, 15 minutes, whatever it might be, to talk about their image. And we'll have Verity and Ed and I to talk to you in a bit more detail about it. It's very simple to come on the live stream. You just need to be able to come on at home on a laptop or on a phone. I will give you the link and I'll explain everything to you beforehand. It's super easy. So to take part in that, you need to either click the link from the Light and Land newsletter, which if you've had that last week, you can look at that, or I will, after this live stream, I will drop the link into the comments of these live streams in both YouTube and Facebook, and you'll be able to follow the link, and you have to put your name, and then you'll be able to upload a couple of images. And I believe the upload is available until the 8th of October. That is what I've written down here. So I'm going to believe myself. So enter your images. We'd really, really love to make you, one of you at least, not all, however many of you, part of these live streams. And I want to introduce this a little bit more if we can going forward. So this is a little experiment for us. We'd love you to get involved. And you can join us on the live stream, like I say. So autumn images, maximum 2. Check the link, get uploading. All right, good. And see me back here at that time. Astrid, though, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And yes, it's always good. And you are an original. You've done all of these live streams over the variations that we've had. And you're always very welcome, obviously. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, for some of you who may have joined later, we're going to have a series of these running up to Christmas every other week, give or take. We'll post them on Facebook and YouTube and through the Light and Land newsletter, like I say, where you can always get the down low on what's coming up next. And do join me for the autumn trip. Thank you very much to everybody who's just said thank you. So I'll very briefly touch on that. Jane, enjoyable and so interesting. A couple of people said earlier on they're really happy that these are back, and so that's good. Thank you for telling us that. We're happy to be here. And Phil, thank you both. Oh, and there you go, Charlie's being nice to us, so thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
And yes, it's all about Astrid's photography. Right, I'll let everybody go. Nice one, nice to be back with you. See you in a couple of weeks for the autumn show, but for now, goodbye.